Okay, well, I think we'll crack into it now. Welcome along, everyone, and thank you for logging on to the webinar today. Our webinar today, the next one in RSM's series of webinars, is around optimising performance by leveraging technology. And surely, if there was ever a time in our existence where technology was important, it is now. With us today, we've got Hamish McLaughlin and John Claridge from OneHQ. OneHQ is a business technology company. They've got a focus on the mid-market, and they're very focused on productivity and process automation and all of those great things that help our businesses run better and more smoothly. And certainly with a focus there on the bottom line. I'll just bring the slides up, and I will get John and Hamish to do their presentation.
Great, so we've got the mute off, that's good. So morning everyone, my name's Hamish, my colleague here John. So we wanted to, I guess, share some of our learnings and thoughts. We've been working, I guess, in the sector for a number of years, and certainly the whole environment's changed a lot over the last 12 months. A lot of businesses still want to grow or change, but we're sort of finding that sometimes it's easier to focus on changing within your business rather than having to go out and find new clients. So driving productivity uplifts and performance improvements is certainly a big focus from a number of clients right now. What's going on here? There we go. Oh. So a bit of an overview of what we're going to talk through. We just wanted to think about changing perceptions of how you can use technology, or what technology how it can best optimize in your business. There's a whole lot of common problem areas, and I'm sure a lot of those will resonate with you when we go through those. Thinking about how do you plan for change, and then some of the common outcomes. I think at the end we'll go through some of the projects we've been working on lately, and some of the things that have worked well, some of the things that haven't worked so well. We'll go through some of those. So just as a starting point, I think there's a number of different moving parts in your business. And often we run into this problem of, we've got a strategy, but we haven't really thought about how that works with other parts of your business. You haven't necessarily seen how all those bits can integrate together and work well together. So I think if you're trying to build sort of resilience or improvements in your business, it's not just about sort of the work from home type angle. It's almost about thinking about how does your business work. So when we say working on your business as a machine, it's actually more important to think about how you do things rather than what you do, because actually your business is almost your IP and your valuable asset, almost as much as what is your products or your services out the other end. We very much think about making it as efficient as possible, and then trying to think of probably processes and systems. They need to be congruent with each other. They need to really work together seamlessly to get the best out of that machine. So John, any sort of thoughts around some of the?
I agree. I think business does need to be thought as a machine. And the first thing that comes to mind there is something that Elon Musk said recently. Was the biggest epiphany he had in business this year was that he realized to start thinking of not the machine, but to start thinking of the machine that builds the machine as the core of the business.
Yeah. And so the only other point to make in there, I think on the right hand side, we talk about we're always focused on the outcome. How does it impact your people and your clients? They don't often see what's happening in behind the brand or inside your business. So you've got to make sure that any process or technology improvements, they positively impact the experience of your clients. Now, if we then try and think about some of the focus areas for technology, because often technology is seen as maybe more like a hygiene factor, and it's not really thought of as a strategic, let's call it, tool to help try and drive change in your business. So the key three areas we try and focus on around working well, which is very much about your people, how they work together, how they collaborate, how they understand the systems that they're using, and actually do they even engage with those systems well. Staying safe has been quite a big topic this year especially, so that's very much using the right type of technology in your business. Protection, security have certainly been big areas, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And also I think that stay safe area is often a big part of the audit process that you might go through. So with Brendan, and what we tend to do off the back of an audit process is go and do a deeper dive in like an IT review to try and uncover where some of those problem areas exist. And then the Think Future is very much about trying to use the right type of technology to drive business outcomes. So the right types of applications, integrations, it's more like business optimization type topics. Again, always focused on achieving some business type goals. And I think that's probably the clear linkage here. We try and move away from the technical aspects of technology and make sure it's clearly linked with business outcomes.
It's interesting through some of the conversations we've been having how there's almost an understanding within a business that you understand your processes and you understand, but when you actually go and have these conversations with some of the business leaders and the business owners, and you bring in some of the people who are actually on the driving edge of the business, some of those processes don't actually match up. I think it's important to understand some of those things, and that's how you might be able to bring out some of those, reduce that complexity.
Yeah, I think that we had an example recently where we were in with a senior management team, and they were adamant that a certain process on their manufacturing floor worked a certain way, and we were mapping out all their processes, and we said, let's just check this with a couple of guys off the floor. They came in, started to get involved in the conversation, and it became very obvious that they didn't use that system or process at all. In fact, what actually happened was a piece of paper got moved around the shop floor, which was highly inefficient, but no one really talked about that problem before. So, I think that's a lot of it's about trying to understand from top to bottom of your organization, really, where are the bottlenecks or blockages that are going on. So just around those three themes of people, technology, and business, here are sort of some of the common problem areas that we're seeing. Around people, I think it's actually quite interesting is the lack of knowledge from a lot of people and businesses. Often new apps or pieces of technology are put in place, but then people don't actually, they might use them for the first month or two, but over time, they're not often used, mainly because people have to use multiple systems and they get really confused about what they should be using. Remote working being a big topic, perhaps earlier in the year, we've had a lot of work in that space, but I think that's probably fairly well covered now. I think John has done a lot of Teams type implementations and so forth.
We certainly have. What we're sort of starting to find now is a move towards, okay, we all rushed out to fix some of these issues and get our businesses working remotely, and we sort of had to do that at such a pace that we didn't stop as businesses to think about how we were now going to secure that data. And this sort of ties back in quite nicely to the change of the Privacy Act coming up with the 1st December, which is going to affect just about every business, in fact, every business and all of your clients out there as well. Effectively meaning that any data breach moving forward, it has to be reported, and there'll be good amounts of fines for those sort of things. So how do we turn that remote workforce that we've just changed over the last 3-6 months and make sure that we're actually providing good data security as well at the same time? Australia have had this model for the best part of 2.5 years now, and in that time they've reported about 513 breaches. Interestingly enough, most of those breaches are actually from insurance markets, finance and healthcare markets, I think about 63%. So it's definitely something that we need to start thinking about and tying back. Yes, we have this remote workforce now, but hackers and people are starting to target not the business itself, but the people who are working at home.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, that's probably perhaps your weakest link. I think we've come across 2 examples in the last 2 months too, where businesses have been held to ransom. If their entire systems have been taken over, haven't been backed up properly. Now, this has perhaps previously been seen as a problem that's never going to happen to you, but it's actually right at our front door right now, and it's happening more and more. So, security, protection, really big topics. Perhaps more on the business side. It's surprising the number of businesses that don't have good CRM type systems, so better ways of engaging their clients, understanding what their clients really need, and sort of building a stronger relationship and sales pipeline off the back of that. Another area that we've certainly run into is where there's a mismatch between the demand on sales and the capability to manufacture. So it's like inventory management type systems that aren't really in place. We've seen companies where they're either running out of raw materials or they've got too much. So we're looking at trying to how do you reduce your working capital by optimizing amount of raw materials you have on board. Other type of topics you've run into, John?
I think mostly recently it's around that security and identifying those loopholes where there are strong security. As you mentioned before, the malware situation, and I think it's important to note that there is such a culture in New Zealand of it'll never happen to our business, and the truth is it will. And as much as you don't want it to, you need to make sure that some of these technology solutions that you're putting in place are also secure.
Cool. Well, one other point I'd like to raise there is around the reporting. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to perhaps understand your operational metrics a whole lot better. I think most businesses have good financial reporting, but not operational reporting. So bringing data together into one data source, having good dashboards and so forth to really understand some of the projects that you're doing, actually implementing, that you're implementing are actually changing the performance of your business. So you need to be able to monitor that really efficiently. So there was perhaps some of the more technical aspects, but I think often there are problems for decision makers as well, which is, do I need to start? Where should I start? Perhaps it might become too disruptive to drive change. And I think as we alluded earlier, often businesses don't really know where their true problem is. And what I mean by that is often you might have been operating for years a certain way and think that, okay, that margin we're making or that process is good enough, but it's not until you really get a good common understanding of where the blockages are that you can really identify those problems. So, it's probably inaction is not the right answer, is really what I'm trying to get to here.
It's interesting you raise that, because we were in a business recently where the idea, and this comes back to the disruption, the idea for the business was to replace a piece of infrastructure that relied on a single person in the business to manage. If that person left, there was no one else who could come in and take over that role. So we thought, okay, let's talk about the options. Let's find something that will take over the role of that particular piece. Doesn't seem too difficult. It doesn't seem that disruptive. But what we found when we got in there is actually that piece of infrastructure had ties into every single business process within the way that this business run.
That is a good point. I think the other thing too is so injecting the right type of energy for change becomes quite important here, because and then getting the right help. So sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So I think finding almost technology providers as a partner to help drive your change becomes really important. The key takeouts there probably are keeping things simple, driving transparency in your business. That common understanding across everyone in your business is definitely a very common theme. So thinking about a plan for change. These might seem relatively simple, but it's surprising how the simple things. You just got to work through a simple process to work out a plan for change. So understanding how your business works today, that might mean documenting processes, involve all your people so you really do understand how those processes work.
I think from a technology level as well, it's oftentimes that you're paying for a solution already that may be able to benefit you moving forward. And what I mean is even things like the Google suites or the Office 365 suites. I was in a company recently where they had a problem of needing to print too many pages. They said, well, how are we going to reduce the printing of all of these pages? And it's quite simple. The answer is just stop printing them. You've got an Office 365 environment with document storage, put the paper in there. And sometimes it's just understanding what you have and making small incremental changes along the way to the technology stack, not thinking, oh, we need to replace or buy a huge server infrastructure to do this.
Yeah, I think they're often systems and processes are understood at the macro level, but it's the devil's in the detail, and that's where you can really get some performance improvements down at that detail level. And then often the intellectual property of a business sits in a lot of people's heads, and trying to get that out and systemize it and put it embedded within your processes and systems becomes really important.
Yeah, that's right. A person isn't a process.
That's right. So I think what we're trying to work towards here is you've got to try and build a solid platform from which you can start to evolve off. And so we focus strongly on building effectively a roadmap for change, which doesn't mean you have to make big changes at once. It's more like evolving in small steps, because you tend to learn as you evolve. Often you see businesses who, there's a new shiny toy, almost a great new system that might solve all the problems at once. Let's go and implement that, and everything will be sorted. But what you find is it might solve a specific problem in the business, but then it often creates another problem in another part of the business, and it just creates more complexity.
Yeah, using software, hardware, the people that you actually have and the processes that you have to enable interactions so that the business all functions harmoniously. And I think it all ties back to understanding the business processes in the first place to get that harmonious interaction.
So some common outcomes. I think what we're trying to talk about here is just, we've worked on a number of projects over the last little while. What are some of the things that have worked well? So I think integration has been a common theme. So I've recently worked on a business where the demand over COVID for their product just skyrocketed, and there was no linkage. They didn't have a CRM, and they didn't really start to understand that demand increase until it was a bit late, and they started to run out of raw materials when they were in the manufacturing area of the business, and they lost huge amounts of opportunity just because they couldn't match up production with demand. So in that case, they're implementing CRM, integrating that with the manufacturing system, having an inventory management tool in the middle to make sure they were forecasting. That we actually did that relatively quickly, and it made huge improvements within a month or two.
So sort of a huge number of very large systems in the wild these days, and there was sort of a time when business systems, an all-in-one approach, it was you can do everything here, and oftentimes they would do things well to some degree, and then a whole bunch of really bad things. But once these systems get into your business, it creates a lot of technical debt, and oftentimes it's hard to then roll out of that technical debt if you're so ingrained into one of these systems, which means when it comes time to update and add something else that might improve your system, business, and process, it becomes very difficult to take that information away from the old ERP or these sort of things.
Yeah, I think you're right. Trying to move away from a existing ERP system that's not quite working for your business can look like a mammoth task. But perhaps the best way to do it is slowly add almost best-of-breed apps that plug in around the outside that can solve specific problems, and you can evolve away from that ERP system over time with small steps. So that's certainly been an area we've worked on quite a bit over recent months. And I think what we mean by that is, and I'll try to use an example here with a sort of a diagram, is often technology change is seen as, big lumpy changes that might happen every five years or so, and they're quite disruptive. They have big disruptive impacts on a business. So the approach we're suggesting is once you understand your change roadmap, those small incremental steps that you might do, every quarter or every 6 months, and make sure they're clearly linked to business outcomes, so you can show as you're evolving your technology, you're actually driving performance change in your business. I think that feels like it's been the best approach, and you get the best outcomes. So almost allocating a regular budget to a monthly budget that you can start allocating on that change program, and it gets away that it almost stops you thinking of change as too hard, because change happens slowly over time, and it's if you spread it, remember you're learning as you're going, so you end up with better outcomes.
When you've got smaller bite-sized pieces of application or technology within the business, and you can take a small simple piece and change it out easily without a huge disruption, it makes the technology roadmap a lot easier and less disruptive to the business over time as well. And also CapEx versus operational expenditure, which is, I think, when you have every 3 to 5 years this huge server project that you may have, that can be quite disruptive to the business, both financially and through a period where you're transitioning. Whereas if you have these smaller incremental changes over time, it can make that whole process a lot easier.
So, conscious of time here, so that was relatively high level. This is a massive topic area, and I'm not entirely sure what the audience is at the other end. So why don't we try and move into a question?
Yeah. So sorry. One of the things I didn't mean to add at the start was that if you do have any questions, if you can just add them in the chat function, and we can see if we can cover some of those off. But I guess if I can maybe just start off by maybe just talking a bit about the sort of working from home, and I guess what that's done is that, and increasingly with the younger generation, we've got more people working on their own devices and multiple devices. So there's sort of multiple entry points into a business. So I guess how as an employer do you sort of ensure that that things are under control there, that their employees are being good guardians of the company and the company data with the changes in the Privacy Act and those sort of things? Is there a simple way that we can use technology to help with that?
There's definitely a number of ways that you can do that. And I think it's important to realise what it is that you're trying to achieve. Obviously, there's security at the edge or where your staff members are, but it's where you put that data and how that data is. If you have Azure, for example, workstations, your data is sitting in a data center in Australia. Your staff could be logging in that way via a VPN, a secure sort of connection tunnel between the two. You could have all of your data sitting in a server, your own hosted data center, using an application like Citrix. I think one of the things is there's always a toss-up between allowing staff members to achieve what it is they're doing without putting too much red tape, while also keeping that data safe and your IP protected. So there is a comfortable balance, but it's so specific to every business. I think that it's a conversation you have to have at a high level and work from there.
Sure. And you talked about, I guess if we call it idle technology, so that technology or the parts of your technology that isn't being used. How do you go about educating probably people like me, really, that aren't that technology savvy? about the use of that and continuing, to expand people's, use of that technology. How do you sort of go about doing that? Is there a simple answer there?
Well, for me, I think going back to processes, because often you're right, you have applications or systems within your business that, what's it really there for? But if you understand your processes really well, it's trying to get that, we talked about earlier, getting your systems to work the way your process, the business needs to work. So I always go back to process as being, start there, then work back out. Do we still need this tech? What's it doing for us? Is there a better way we can do it? And perhaps a simpler way, having less systems is often a better thing.
Yeah, indeed. We all like less systems. So we've got a question here on the chat. If you're seeing, are you seeing more local solutions as opposed to overseas ones for problems or opportunities? And I guess that's really, are we creating solutions for ourselves here, or are most of those coming from overseas?
Well, I think there's a combination. I think that there's an interesting question here about the Band-Aid approach to fixing some of your IT challenges or your business challenges. That is common, and I think the trouble with that is often you're building up more complexity, and I think our approach there, or our recommendation there, would just be go back and try and understand your end-to-end process again. Review each of those Band-Aid solutions, because there's actually some really great pieces of technology coming out now. And I think that's probably half the problem. It's the amount of research you need to do, understand what's the best of breed solution becomes a problem. And then you're getting sold to by vendors who said, we've got the ideal solution here. So great, that shiny thing sounds perfect, let's embed that. And then you find another one comes in and you put that in. So I think trying to take a more holistic view to how all these pieces fit together is really important. It does take a little bit of effort to go back and think of it that way, but it's definitely worth it.
I'd just like to address that last question regarding overseas versus New Zealand solutions. So we have some incredible tech coming out of New Zealand and in the New Zealand sector that address a whole lot of problems that are hurting large overseas as well. We're not just addressing New Zealand problems, we're addressing a broader set of issues. But companies like Microsoft are investing heavily in New Zealand as well, and the Azure data center that's going to be built in 2 years' time. So there are also these overseas technologies that are investing in New Zealand and coming and bringing it local as well. So that's actually a really interesting opportunity for companies and sectors that have issues like keeping the data in New Zealand by law. It has to be here, data sovereignty, rather than using Azure data centers, which are hosted in Sydney or Australia or Singapore.
I think the other thing to think about with some of the offshore solutions is the solutions can be really good. They can be really cost effective, but when it comes to change or support, I know we've even had this experience within our own business where the support is, like we might be based out of Estonia or Eastern Europe, and they're only available overnight, and the support is actually quite poor. So you just need to be conscious of those types of topics as well.
Yeah, definitely when you're picking a new solution for your business, thinking of those sort of things as well can really make an impact on how you're supported in the future.
Yeah. I think we do have a couple of questions there on the Q&A. If I can make the technology work. So with the apps available,
there's a cost issue, and I think that is a good question. It's like, because sometimes you think change needs to be expensive, but it actually doesn't. And so typically what we find is if you invest around about, because it's both time and cost, but I think cost around about $5,000, and you can have this is from our experience and the types of services we offer, all your systems documented, a future view of what those processes should look like, and a technology roadmap to help you get there. And then change beyond that doesn't have to be that expensive either. We've often found it can, a few $1,000s invested here or there can make significant improvements to business outcomes. So we're trying to look at cost-effective change. Some IT service providers have really in-depth review type processes that cost many tens of thousands, and I often just don't think you need to go there.
I think there's also a perception amongst companies is that if I tell my IT company the budget, they're going to use the entire amount. That's
Yes,
but that's not necessarily the case. If you tell us the budget, it makes it easier for us to give you appropriate suggestions for the use of their budget and sort of give you a timeline towards achieving some of those goals that you might have.
Creating a bit more focus.
That's right. Yeah.
Another interesting question around CRM and not for profit. So look, there's a lot of, you've got to really think about how you want to engage with your clients and what sort of information you want to start to capture from your clients. So having a CRM system is good, but you need a good strategy, because at the end of the day, it's sort of a data collection system, and it needs to be easy to use for your clients. What I mean by there is you've almost got to have processes around the outside of that CRM to capture information off your clients. You might be sending out content to clients that's prompting them to respond in certain ways, so then you can start to understand what their needs are. So I think CRM is the starting point, but you have to think about the strategy and what you're trying to achieve with your client and what do you want to learn more of them with. So, yep, I think every business should be thinking about having a CRM in place and building better relationships with your clients. Difficult to perhaps go into that any more detail with it, sort of understanding sort of some of your specific needs there.
But it's part of the more holistic approach, really.
Yes. Again, these implementations are not expensive, but you still have to put the time in to understand what it is you're trying to achieve, or the outcomes of that.
And I suspect that's probably part of the challenges. A lot of people think they're expensive, and they probably can be expensive, but maybe don't need to be.
Yeah. Look, we've seen clients now who've done really expensive Salesforce implementations, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and are now moving across to tools like Pipedrive, which you can literally configure with almost, with very minimal cost.
It's having the Rolls Royce.
Yeah, that's right.
It's having the Rolls Royce when the Toyota Corolla will do just fine.
That's right.
Well, I think we've got one last question here. So, which is really looking at, is there a website that provides some good reviews of what's available?
Well, there's almost endless reviews of products. I don't think there's really one place that you can go and find it all on your own. I mean, I think we have the added advantage of that. We work with many hundreds of clients. We see what apps work really well together, like the combinations, what ones don't. So sometimes just getting a bit of a steer from someone who's worked a lot with lots of different systems is as good a way of doing some research as anything. And so, like, I'm always more than happy to take a call for anyone who's been thinking about trying to solve certain problems, and we can at least steer you in the right direction.
There are a few really well-reputable companies out there, such as Gartner, who will review certain things and give you a good idea as well, with trusted resource. Because if you Google, is this a good application, you're going to get every answer and response under the sun, and half of it's advertising.
Yeah, that's sort of, I think, the point. I think you can review a piece of software and app and say, yes, it does its function really, really well. But I think the thing to think about is what combinations should you be using and how do they work that well together? And I haven't really seen many websites that show the combinations and how that works.
Well, look, that's great, and certainly thank you everyone for those questions. And I think we might call it there. We're slightly over time. but hopefully everyone's found that useful. I think that was really helpful, and I mean, I certainly took a lot away from that. And I'm not the most IT savvy person in the world, but I think that the more that we can all learn about all of this stuff, keep ourselves safe, but also help that productivity and efficiency angle. And certainly one of the things that I took out of that was really that small incremental change, because I think we all have this view that IT is, we look at IT as one big thing, when actually really it's a whole lot of little things all put together, and that incremental change is really what's important and easier in terms of that implementation as well.
I think that's probably the key message of this session here is think of small steps. Doesn't have to be a big investment, and think of how it can drive business outcomes.
So Hamish, John, thank you very much for that. It was very helpful. Just before we close, folks, just a quick plug for our next webinar in our series. That's going to be on the 5th of November. That's on mental fitness. And certainly we all need a bit more mental fitness at the moment. Some of us need a bit more physical fitness as well. But so mental fitness, and we're going to have Sean, who's the CEO from the Mental Health Foundation, talking to us about mental fitness. So the registrations for that will be open shortly. So certainly encourage you to log into that webinar. It should be a good session. So thank you very much for being part of the webinar today, and we'll look forward to having you online again next time.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Bye.